Last week, we talked about the top 5 Carolina Hurricanes players going into the 25-26 season. On the Wednesday edition of the pod, we are going to look at the top 5 depth players when it comes to the team and how important they're going to be for the Carolina Hurricanes this upcoming season as they look to capture their second Stanley Cup in franchise history.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers, also the co-host of the Surgecast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all of my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. On the Wednesday edition of the show, like I said, we're going to be talking about 5 Carolina Hurricanes players in terms of their depth roles that are going to be very huge for the Canes this upcoming season. We're going to be talking Taylor Hall, Mark Jankowski, the Jordans, and even Eric Robinson. But before we jump into that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets. Now we're actually going to start off with this is not specific order, but we're just going like a 5-through-1 system, but it's not in terms of, this guy's the most important. It's just these are the guys we're going to run through. And we're going to start off with Mark Jankowski. And he came over, at the trade deadline this past season for just a draft pick. And surprisingly, I think a lot of people I don't think anyone knew that the run that Jankowski was going to have with the Carolina Hurricanes in the 19 games following up being traded from the Nashville Predators, where he scored 4 goals on his first 4 shots. Like, you're talking about absolutely unreal shooting from Jankowski. And the crazy part was he basically tied his Nashville total in a span of 4 games, which is crazy to think about how many goals he scored in a week that he had in his first 41 games of the Nashville Predators. He did finish the season with 12 goals and 17 points overall in the 60 games that he played, but in the 19 with the Hurricanes, he scored 8 goals, finished with a +4, even had a game winner in the process too. How about 21 shots in those 19 games? He had a 38.1 shooting percentage and did average over 12 minutes and 16 seconds of ice time, was at 50.5% on the faceoffs, winning 106, losing 104, had 14 block shots and 4 hits in the process. So as of right now, if you look at what Daily Faceoff's putting out there and what some of the projected rosters are looking like, as of now, they're putting Mark Jankowski as the extra forward for the Carolina Hurricanes, because as of right now, they're looking at the 4th line as William Carrier, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and Eric Robinson. I would say most likely I don't see Kotkaniemi being that 4th line center. I do see him being that 2nd line center, and this is where it's going to get very interesting in terms of the 4th line. I would say that you could see a situation where it'd probably be like a Svechnikov, Kotkaniemi, Jarvis 2nd line, or I wouldn't even say Jarvis. Probably like a Svechnikov, Hall, Kotkaniemi type deal if that was going to work out, or that's just the situation I think is going to happen, and that's where you're probably moving Jackson Blake or Taylor Hall to the 4th line. It could be a Svechnikov, Kotkaniemi, Blake 2nd line, or however that plays out. And I see Taylor Hall going on the 4th line. And in that instance, you're probably looking at like a Taylor Hall, Mark Jankowski, Eric Robinson 4th line. Carey did miss a lot of games last year. I think him coming back did add some edge to the Hurricanes, but when you look at a guy like Mark Jankowski, I see him more as someone who kind of fits that 4th line center a little bit more in terms of what you're looking for. And I just don't think the Hurricanes want to take what he does out of the line, because the fact he wins a lot of faceoffs. Like I said, if you look at last season alone, just in a short stint, 50.6%. Ever since the 22-23 season, he's been at 55.7, 50.3, and 50.6. And for his entire career, he's a 48.9% faceoff guy in the dot. And he's going into his first full season with the Hurricanes. He's a guy who's big, can win faceoffs. Obviously, he can score goals. And I'm curious, it seemed like he fit in really well with the system in the regular season and the playoffs. So that's where I'd see maybe Jankowski being someone that's going to be very important for the team as a fourth line center guy. And then you're kind of rearranging, KK goes to the second line, probably going to move Taylor Hall down, probably move Andrei Svechnikov to the wing, or, there's a combination of just different things that's going to happen. But I think Mark Jankowski can be a very important Carolina Hurricane, especially for depth, and that goes into Taylor Hall, where Taylor Hall really put himself into a good situation with the Hurricanes last season, where he was someone who was kind of not really known as the big piece to the trade that saw the Hurricanes get Mikko Rantanen, but he scored a lot of power play goals really quick for the Hurricanes in the first few games. 9 goals, 18 points in 31 games. He did finish with a +1, but did have 4 power play goals in the regular season of 14.5% shooting with 62 shots. He did average 15 minutes and 7 seconds of ice time, 13 block shots, 20 hits. And of course, Taylor Hall got that nice contract for 3 years. And, it's a deal that's great because the fact that you're not paying him a whole lot. It's around $3 million. It's 3 years. You set yourself up to have a guy who can really help out, especially if you want to play in that top 6, top 9, or even fourth line if need be. He does add some good depth to the Carolina Hurricanes, and it does help on the power play too. So because I know Daily Faceoff has Seth Jarvis as second line center, Rod Brind'Amour on Kane's corner with Adam Goldstead. He's not going to put him there. So most likely you're going to have KK probably being your second line center. That means you're going to probably have to either move Jarvis up to the first line with Aho Ehlers, or you might have to play him on the left wing, and maybe it's a Jackson Blake on the right side, and then it's Kotkaniemi going in your second line. Then I can see maybe you put Taylor Hall on that fourth line with Jankowski Robinson, which is still a pretty solid fourth line, all things considered. But then you're having, maybe the chemistry of KK and Jarvis, or even you put Svechnikov, because Svechnikov even had some, some chemistry with Kotkaniemi. Then you have Jackson Blake on that side, or it's Logan Stankoven, you move Jackson Blake to the third line. Either way, I think when you look at Taylor Hall, if you're not having Jarvis as a winger and you want to keep him in that top 6, and you got to figure out who you're going to have, either him or Svechnikov on that top line, I don't see a reason why the Hurricanes need to move Blake down, or maybe, if he does switch with Stankoven, you got to keep those guys within the top 9. So maybe odd man out is Taylor Hall, and that's where you kind of see him on that fourth line. And it's not really a demotion, because if you think about it, Rod plays all of his lines. He gives guys his minutes. So even if Taylor Hall is on technically the fourth line, which Brind'Amour doesn't really number his lines, he's still going to get his ice time, and he's still going to be very important to the team, and he's going to be on the power play in it. So that's not going to be anything different. Whether it's first or second, it's probably going to be second more than anything else, but he's going to get his time. And even with, being with Jankowski and Robinson, that's a pretty sneaky fourth line, all things considered. When you got the speed of Robinson, you got the two-way playmaking ability of a Taylor Hall, and you got the size of Jankowski, who's going to win you faceoffs and does a nice shot, as a very sneaky shot too. I think a line of Hall, Jankowski, Robinson could be a very good line, all things considered, for the Carolina Hurricanes. So I see that's a possible reason there. So if you look at Jankowski, Hall, having those two guys on that fourth line with Robinson could be a very huge deal when all things considered for the Hurricanes. If you're looking at some really good depth scoring that could help you on, the bottom 6 and on the power play too, because even Mark Jankowski saw some PP2 time last year as well, and he kind of did well for himself there. So I think those two guys could really, find a way to make things work for the Carolina Hurricanes. So if you're looking at Hall and Jankowski in terms of depth, I think you're in a pretty good spot for the Carolina Hurricanes, especially when you're looking at them as possibly fourth line guys and guys you can put in your power play in it. Now, talking about guys who are very important to the team, especially on the depth side of things, or guys who do a lot for the team, maybe that's not on the score sheet, well, that's Jordan Martinook and Jordan Staal. Stick around and we'll talk about the Jordans here in a second on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you're putting off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel the comfort of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. And you easily can identify what you aren't saving as much as you thought. Monarch helps you notice the inefficient investment allocation and discover forgotten 401ks from past jobs. So don't let the financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONNHL. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. Before we go into the Jordans real quick, guys, we have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thanks for helping us out. Now, we're going to go into the Jordans. And the first one we're going to go to is Jordan Martinook. And we all know how important Jordan Martinook is as a leader of the team, as one of the alternate captains, and someone who's very much a glue guy in terms of the locker room, for just being someone who's always going to be there to hype the guys up, making sure that it's just someone that you can lean on in the locker room. And the great thing about Jordan Martinook is the fact that he's always trying to make himself better, and he's had a pretty good run as of late, especially with the Carolina Hurricanes over the last 3 seasons. And I think he's, when you look at the playoffs especially, Jordan Martinook has really shown how good he is as a Carolina Hurricane when it comes to the playoffs, just for his on ice and off ice contributions, but even off the score sheet contributions as well. But if you're looking at the score sheet, how about 15 goals, which tied a career high last year for Jordan Martinook, 21 assists, also tied a career high, but he set a new career high in points with 36. Over the last 3 seasons, how about 34 back in 22-23, 32 in 23-24, and then 24-25 put up 36 points and set a career best plus 16 for his plus minus. That's the first time he's ever hit double digits in the positive side of the category. You love to see that. All 15 goals were on the even strength, but he did have 3 game-winning goals, which you love to see. 112 shots. He did have a shorthanded assist. His shot percentage, 13.4%, career high for Martinook. Average ice time, about 15 minutes and 18 seconds. 48.6% in the faceoff, winning 35, losing 37. 52 block shots, 84 hits. It goes to show that Jordan Martinook is not afraid to lay the body and sacrifice it as well. 52 block shots is the second most he's put in his career. The only one that he had more block shots for when he had 68 back with the now unfortunately defunct Arizona Coyotes back in the 16-17 season. And surprisingly enough, he didn't get any Selke votes this past year. 23-24, he was 30th in Selke, and then the season before he was 34th. When you look at Jordan Martinook, he's a guy who I think he's a very underrated player, especially for what he does And the fact, like I said, he had a career high in points and tied career highs for goals and assists as well. And he did all this in 79 games. Of course, that was mainly due to rest. He's played 82 games the other 2 years. So he could have had back-to-back seasons of 82 games played. That's just how good he is. The fact that he can play an entire season and still produce the way he's been doing. You're not going to get 50-point seasons out of him, but what you're getting mid to upper 30s, that's really good for a guy who's mainly known that's going to be someone who's going to be a disruptor on the back check and even the forecheck as well. And honestly, him and Jordan Staal are probably two of the best PK guys that the Hurricanes have. And that's not even talking about what the offensive contributions that Sebastian Aho and Seth Jarvis bring. It's just the shutdown factor that Jordan Martinook has, because we've seen over the last few seasons, especially when you have him paired with Jordan Staal and then whoever's on their other side of it, a Jesper Foss or a Seth Jarvis, a Logan Stankoven, and you name it. The Jordans together have done really well. And I think for Jordan Martinook, that's why you see he got a three-year, $3 million contract. That's why he wants to stay here, because he loves the area, he loves the fan base, and that's just a great locker room. And when you have him as one of your alternate captains to be one of the guys that leads the way, I think Jordan Martinook as a depth player does a lot for the Hurricanes that it doesn't show up on the score sheet a lot, but when it does, you'll definitely take notice, especially to play, not this past postseason, but the postseason before, when you're putting, Wayne Gretzky-like numbers, that does say a lot. So I think when or two playoffs ago, there's just something about Jordan Martinook that makes you just really appreciate for what he does for the Hurricanes and for the fan base as well. So if there's a depth guy you're looking at, and I say depth in a way that's like, he'll provide that scoring that maybe they're not going to see in your top, guys like an Aho or a Jarvis or a Svechnikov, but it's that next tier of guys that will score goals for you, will put up the points, but is someone who does a little bit more off the sheet that does a lot of the work. That's what you're looking at a guy like Jordan Martinook. He just does so much for the Carolina Hurricanes that you have to appreciate what he does for the team, in all facets of the game when it comes to penalty kill, back check, forecheck, neutral zone, just all the defensive side things, and the fact that he is with Jordan Staal, and those two guys are the main cogs to locking down other teams' best players. That's a huge ask, and the fact that him and Staal do it so well, that's why Ryan Brind'Amour leans on those two guys to be those shutdown players for the Carolina Hurricanes whenever they're playing like a Crosby, a McDavid, a McKinnon, all those type of guys. Those are the dudes that Rod Brind'Amour goes to on a nightly basis during the regular season and in the playoffs as well. And we're talking about Jordan Martinook. You got to talk about the captain, Jordan Staal. And I know there's a lot of contention around, some people when it comes to certain groups of people that look at Jordan Staal. He's a captain, but he's making, the X amount of money. He's not putting up like super huge points. He had 13 goals this past season, 36 points. Yes, you're not going to be seeing, early in his Hurricanes curve, like 15, 16, 16, 17, is putting up 40-something points. But you're still getting 36 out of the captain, a plus 15. He was 1+ behind, Martinook got a 16. Yeah, he only played in 75 games, mainly to rest, a little bit due to injury. But talking about a guy who had 2 short-handed goals, 3 game winners. How about 15 minutes and 26 seconds of ice time? How about a 54.5% in the faceoff dot, winning 724 faceoffs, losing 605, 43 block shots. But of course, here's the stat that's a kicker. It's another season of him going 100+ hits. He had 138 this past season. The last time he's had anything less than 100 hits was back in the 14-15 season, where he only played 46 games. He had 85 hits in 46 games that year for the Carolina Hurricanes. Other than that, the last time he had anything where he that's just something about Jordan Staal, is the fact that he will put his body on the line every single night. And the thing, too, is while he finished second in the Selke the previous season in 23-24, somehow he placed 11th in Selke votes once again. Vastly underrated. If it wasn't like a Patrice Bergeron or all these other guys that kind of look at who are these Selke guys, Jordan Staal would already have a Selke by this point. That's just how good he is. And the fact that he does a lot more off the ice, a lot more off the score sheet, just like the same thing with Jordan Martinook. The defensive side of his game, the way he just constantly wins faceoffs. Shane Willis and Mike Maniscalco and even Trip Tracy have said it multiple times. Players around the league have said Jordan Staal is the hardest guy to beat in the faceoff dot because just of his size. That's why he constantly wins so many faceoffs. He's the hardest guy to beat in the dot. And how many times have we seen players try to throw a hit on him and he just stands there and they bounce right off him? He doesn't have to reverse hit someone. He just has to stand tall and just be a brick wall. That's a guy like that Jordan Staal is. Yeah, maybe he's the more quieter guy when it comes to, captains. A lot of people want those rah-rah, get in your face, get loud type of guys, but it's the leading by example. It's the guy who has been there and done that and who's just has been a leader of the locker room for so long. And that's why he's a captain. That's why a lot of people respect him. That's why a lot of people go to Jordan Staal because he just tied his brother for the most seasons in the Hurricanes organization. He's done so much for this team since coming over in that trade from the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I think that's why, in terms of you're looking at guys who are very important on the depth and just all facets of back check, forward check, penalty kill, stuff like that. That's what Jordan Staal is, because him and Martinook together have been so good. There was points where you saw Jordan Staal being so good with Nito Niederreiter before he left. Staal has been a constant third line guy who's just been someone who's been a rock, and that's someone that Rod Brind'Amour has leaned on, and that's why there's so much respect for Jordan Staal for what he does on a nightly basis, where he's just shutting down the best players and doing all he can to help the Carolina Hurricanes. So when you're looking at, if you want to say the third and second most important guys or guys on the depth who are just, those are the dudes you need, it definitely is the Jordans. So we talked about Taylor Hall and Mark Jankowski in segment 1. We talked about the Jordans here in segment 2, but stick around. We'll talk about Eric Robinson, why I think he's going to be very huge for the Hurricanes this upcoming season on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for the bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions, so whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. So if you're going to take a flyer on the MVP race, maybe it's a Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Bryce Young, Spencer Rattler, whoever you think of, there are so many options to go do this for. So visit the FanDuel app today and start playing your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So we talked about Jankowski and Hall. We talked about the Jordans, and now we're going to move on to Eric Robinson. And as of right now, a daily faceoff has Eric Robinson as the fourth line right wing, which mainly is right for the most part, because he did start off the season on that second line with Svechnikov or with Nietzsche and Kotkaniemi. And so I think that Robinson really did pop off for the Hurricanes, so much so that he got a 4-year contract extension north of $1 million. Not under 2, but honestly a great deal for the Carolina Hurricanes. But when you look at a guy like Robinson, who going into the season, Seth Jarvis said that him and Rosovic had some very underrated speed. And I think the fact that Robinson fits the Hurricane system perfectly when you're looking at a guy who is 6'2", 211 pounds. He's got the size, but I think the speed also helps too, because he's someone who will go from the offensive zone onto back to your own zone really fast on the back check. Does have a lot of good speed. Does have a sneaky shot as well. It's someone who really fit into the system without skipping very much of a beat. If you think about it, just the fact that he's also not afraid to put his body on the line. In 82 games this past season for the Hurricanes, how about a career high in goals with 14, a career high in assists with 18, a career high in points with 32. Finished with a plus 14, only had 10 penalty minutes, so he was someone who was always available on the ice for the Hurricanes. He did have a game-winning goal. How about 110 shots, a 12.7 shooting percentage? He averaged 12 minutes and 16 seconds of ice time, and that's going from top 4 to the bottom 4 or bottom 6, top 6, and having a little bit of time on the power play as well. How about 16 block shots, and he was 1 hit shy of tying his career high. He had 123 hits for the Hurricanes this past season. He pretty much did it all. You're talking about scoring, he did it. Setting up passes, he did that. Using his speed, using his body as well. He is not afraid to forecheck guys and hound pucks. That's the thing that the Hurricanes work on so well. That's why you see like a guy like Logan Stankoven and Seth Jarvis, guys who aren't tall, going in there and just trying to disrupt plays on the putting the pressure on opposing players in their zone with the forecheck. And then if a puck's going the other way, well, you see Eric Robinson using his speed. He gets back there on the back check and disrupts plays. And I think that is a huge thing for the Carolina Hurricanes. And that's why you kind of saw him a little bit on the PK for, in some instances. You did see him on the power play a little bit. It wasn't long, but you did see some time there as well. But he played a very important role for the Carolina Hurricanes, so much so that they gave him a 4-year contract extension. And he was like, sign me up for it, because he finally got the opportunity to show what he can do, and it was in Carolina that fits the way he plays, and the fact that you're talking about Ryan Brandon, you're talking about Staal, Martinook, the leaders, Aho, Slavin, just the culture around the team, and now it just gives Robinson stability, knowing that he's going to be part of the Carolina Hurricanes, and why I feel like that he's going to be probably one of those big contributing depth guys, because you saw the goals and points he put up last year. Yeah, maybe it trailed off a little bit when there's no niches. He's kind of going up and down the lineup, but you're giving him his second full season with the Hurricanes. There's that stability. Like, okay, I don't have to worry about a contract. I can go and just play my game because I know I got the stability to be here for a long time. If you put him with Jankowski and Hall, or however you want to do that fourth line, I think that's going to be a very sneaky fourth line. And I think having Robinson there is going to be very big for the Carolina Hurricanes. And I think that's why you're looking at a good potential, a really successful second season with the team for Robinson, because the fact that he was so underrated and he brought in a lot of depth scoring for the most part throughout the season. I think if you add that on top of, when you look at the third line of like the Staal with the Jordans, and maybe it's a Blake or a Stankoven, you look at that second line, it's KK and probably, Blake and Jarvis, or Blake and Svetch, or, maybe it's a, Stankoven and those guys, or however you do it. I think having this be like Robinson on that fourth line, where you're looking at guys who are going to maybe do a little bit more hitting, a little bit more of a defensive style of the game, that he will have that sneaky speed, and he will maybe have that sneaky shot to do the business as well, and kind of putting opponents at bay and kind of making them be like, all right, this is technically the fourth line for the Hurricanes, but there's a guy who can throw the body around. He's big, 2'11", 6'2", but he does have a really good speed, really good skating ability, and can score goals too. That's something teams are going to have to worry about. There's like, oh, it's the fourth line. No, this is a fourth line that could probably do damage on you, especially when you got Robinson, and if it's Hall or whoever, that's a line you got to worry about. So I think when you look at guys who are probably going to really take a next step next season for the Hurricanes, who took the whole season to get used to the system for the Hurricanes, now has that stability of not having the contract, or like, am I going to be here next year in the back of his mind? Now he's here for 4 seasons. Now it's just, okay, I'm going to go be loose, play my game, use my skill sets to show why I deserved, or why I earned that 4-year contract. So it's very exciting to see what Eric Robinson can do for his second full season with the Hurricanes, with that stability, with that ease in his mind, and just go and play his game. So if you look at the 5 depth guys to really keep an eye on this upcoming season, it's got to be Taylor Hall, Mark Jankowski, of course the Jordans, and Martinook and Staal, and then finally Eric Robinson. And all things considered, a lot of teams would love to have the problem that the Hurricanes have, where they have too many good guys and they're trying to figure out their lineup and who's going to play where. These are some huge depth guys that are going to help out the Carolina Hurricanes this upcoming season. And how about you? I am so ready for October 9th. I am ready to talk about games. No more predicting. No more looking at down the road. I'm ready to talk about games. I don't know about you guys, but October 9th cannot come fast enough. That is for sure. But this will be the edition of Locked On Hurricanes for making your first visit today. Your podcast Twitter is bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter the most, with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. If you want to keep up with me, I'm at OneTrueZach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky, the Zachary Martin, where you can click the link straight in my bios to find all of my written content at thehockeywriters.com. I'm putting out a lot of stuff as of late. Make sure to keep your eye on it because there's a lot more coming down the pipe for that. If you want to check out my other podcast, well, it's the Surgecast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For Locked On Hurricanes, you can find us on Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review because I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, it's Locked On Hurricanes. Make sure to subscribe. Hit the bell notification so you don't miss the show. Hit the thumbs up to let me know if you like the show as well. Share with other Caniacs to become everydayers just like you. But hope everyone enjoyed the Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Wednesday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.